Light, nimble and extrovert, Nissan's little Juke combines attitude, irreverence, modish style and energy with a mischievous sense of fun. Part SUV, part supermini, part hot hatch, there's nothing quite like it. Now, I've tested some unusual cars in the course of doing these films, but never anything quite like this. The Nissan Juke is unlike anything the market has yet seen. Part SUV, part sports coupe, part hot hatch, with a few bike and rally car genes thrown in for good measure. It sounds an unpromising mix, but against the odds, I rather think it works. And I'm not alone either. Even before this car's launch in the autumn of 2010, Nissan had already sold 30,000 Jukes to customers who hadn't even sat in one. Here's a brand doing rather well at breaking established class cultures. A brand that no longer makes normal family hatchbacks or saloons anymore, instead bringing us cars like the Qashqai, the original part SUV, part MPV crossover, which after its launch in 2007 tempted many away from conventional Focus and Mondeo-sized models. 3 years on, with 500,000 Qashqai sales on the board, the Japanese marque decided that the time was right to shake up the small car sector in much the same way. Traditional customers may not like their way of doing it, but that's fine with Nissan. Such people can go on buying their Micra and Note models. The Juke is for someone altogether more extrovert, youthful, vibrant, energetic and independent. Let's check it out. Now, Nissan thinks that crossover motoring is a far more stylish and satisfying way of getting about in the 21st century, and buyers seem to agree. To begin with, this approach was limited to taking chunky 4x4s, then watering them down so that they were better to drive and cost less to run, yet keeping the high-riding aesthetic SUV-ness that buyers like so much. So, for example, instead of buying a Land Rover Discovery 4 with off-road ability you'll almost certainly never use, Nissan want you to consider their similarly sized plush Murano. In the same way that if you want something more compact, they'd like you to take your family to try their Qashqai instead of buying a Land Rover Freelander or a Toyota RAV4. Now, the Juke represents the next step along that same path to crossover market domination, this time aimed at people who'd normally be looking at a much smaller car. So it has the SUV-ness that you'd find in the littlest off-roaders, cars like Suzuki's Jimny and Grand Vitara 3-door models, without any of the clunkiness that makes such 4x4s so impossible to consider as a day-to-day alternative to a supermini. Quite the opposite, in fact. Nissan wants this car to appeal to the kind of extrovert, style-conscious small car buyer who might otherwise opt for something like a Citroën DS3, a Kia Soul or a Mini, which means it's got to handle, which is quite an ask for something that is the best part of 1.6 metres in height and weighs the best part of 1.5 tonnes. Still, as you begin to realise when throwing this Juke around the country lanes, the cleverness of modern engineering means that unpromising statistics like these can still be converted into a car that delivers quite a satisfying steer. Nissan has had to adopt quite a stiff setup to make it all work, but it's a bearable compromise, creating a car that rides not too badly around town and rolls little through tighter bends. And you can adapt the car to better suit either environment thanks to the settings that lie behind this button here, the D-Mode button, gateway to NDCS, the Nissan Dynamic Control System, standard on all but the humblest Juke models. Tap it and the ventilation buttons suddenly change to option switches, enabling you to flip between Eco, Normal and Sport modes. Now, Sport, as you might expect, gives you weightier steering and slightly sharper throttle response you can monitor via a power pie chart displayed on the screen. In Normal, the eagerness vanishes a bit and you get a torque indicator on the screen, while in Eco, you get slightly more restricted throttle openings and you get a fuel economy meter. Now, personally, I'd have traded a lot of this cleverness for slightly more feelsome electric power steering and a slightly slicker 5 or 6 speed manual gearbox. But you can't deny that NDCS is a fun toy, at least initially, even echoing Nissan's GTR supercar in offering a G-forces meter so that you can measure acceleration, braking and cornering forces. What's important though is that even if you forget all of this frippery, this car really does drive as its looks suggest it should, which is just as well given that the top version, the car I'm driving here, has a 1.6 litre turbocharged DIGT engine developing a potent 190 PS and good for rest to 60 in 8 seconds dead on the way to a top speed of 134 miles an hour. Now, the thought of putting something this powerful into anything small and SUV-like seems unwise on paper, but in practice here results in a concoction that one writer recently likened to a kind of shrunken SUV sports car in super springy trainers. That about sums it up, I think. Of course, not everyone likes or can afford their trainers to be super springy, which is why the majority of Juke sales are of models with less frantic power plants. Either a 117 PS 1.6 litre normally aspirated petrol variant with the same torque as the turbo, or a 110 PS 1.5 litre DCI diesel. In both cases, you're looking at a rest to 60 time of around 11 seconds on the way to a top speed of around 110 miles an hour. In neither case can you opt for four-wheel drive, which seems a bit odd, given that aesthetically, for all the world, this car's tall stance and big wheels make it look like it's just completed a stage of the Paris-Dakar Rally. In fact, Nissan's all-mode 4x4i system is only available at the top of the range, where it partners the 1.6 litre petrol turbo engine I'm using here. Now, though this setup is undoubtedly very clever, capable of shunting torque backwards and forwards and from side to side between the wheels, it's also rather uncomfortably paired with a 6-speed CVT automatic gearbox that takes away much of this Juke's youthful sportiness. Which, along with high pricing, is why most buyers ignore that flagship variant, recognising that the natural habitat of their Juke is in Surbiton, not Snowdon, an environment in which four-wheel drive is pretty unnecessary and through which this car will quite happily cruise over speed humps and poor road surfaces thanks to its large tyres and high ground clearance. Now, whether you like its looks or not, what you can't deny is that this car makes more of a style statement than any other remotely family-friendly 5-door you can buy for sensible money. Encountering a Juke for the first time is a bit like meeting someone from a movie, Disney Pixar's Cars film, for example. You almost expect the gaping, exaggerated grille to open at any moment and Owen Wilson to say something cheeky. Bringing you back to earth with a bump is the realisation that despite its beach buggy shape, this car sits on the dull underpinnings of a conventional Renault Clio or Nissan Micra. Still, many movie stars came from humble beginnings, and with this model, the designers have made the very most of them. Now, stylistically, it's a tale of two halves. The lower section of the car, all SUV with its bulging wheel arches and lower bodywork that emerges from underneath, resembling underbody protection. Above the waistline, though, the sports car DNA shines through, almost as if Nissan had taken the top half of its GTR Super Coupe and welded it to the lower half of its Qashqai crossover, then shrunk the resulting concoction in the wash. Everywhere you look, there are delicious design details. The headlamps, for example, modelled on those of rally cars from the 60s. The indicators and side lights bursting up through slashes in the bodywork. And at the rear, below an integrated spoiler, there are boomerang-shaped tail lamps, like those on a Nissan 370Z sports car. Now, it's just as interesting inside. Though there are no expensive soft-touch plastics used, you don't really notice. Such is the design exuberance. Take this centre console, the thing from which this gear stick protrudes, modelled to resemble the top of a superbike's fuel tank and finished in either grey or red high-gloss paint. The instruments too resemble a bike's, twin clocks shrouded by heavy cowls. Even the door armrests, shaped like the flippers used by scuba divers, are supposed to reflect an active outlook. As a driver, you sit higher up than in an ordinary supermini, which helps when parking. The wing top lights at the corners of the bonnet helping to position the car. And it's relatively easy to get comfortable. A height adjustable driver's seat, compensating for the fact that the leather covered steering wheel adjusts only for height, not for reach. And at the back, well, the rear door handles are disguised to create a coupe-like look. And once you use them, the rear door openings are a little narrow. Once inside though, you'll find that the dimensions Nissan has chosen, which see this car being very slightly longer and very slightly wider than a conventional supermini, certainly create a space that a small family could live with. Now, though the rear bench neither slides or reclines, it does offer decent standards of leg and shoulder room, especially if the occupants are going to be children, though taller teenagers may find their headroom a little restricted by the tapering rear roofline. As for the boot, we'll open up the rear tailgate with its integral fabric parcel shelf, and you'll find a 207 litre loading area that's about 30% bigger than you get in a 3-door Mini, with a further 44 litres available on 2-wheel drive models in this underfloor storage compartment. That's provided you don't take up Nissan's offer to replace the puncture repair kit with an optional space saver wheel. Now, if that's not enough, you can push forward the 60/40 split folding rear seats to release up to 830 litres of total luggage space. Most Juke models sell in the £13,500 to £17,000 price bracket, but you can pay up to £21,000 or more for one. To go from 117 PS 1.6 litre petrol power to 110 PS 1.5 litre DCI diesel power, you're looking at a premium of around £1,350. As for the turbocharged 1.6 litre petrol DIGT model that I've been driving here, well, that'll cost you a premium of around £1,700 over the normally aspirated petrol version. And four-wheel drive? Well, for that, you'll need this turbocharged engine, and it'll cost you a hefty premium of £2,500 over a comparable two-wheel drive model. As for rivals, well, there's nothing quite like a Juke. Nothing that Mini can offer anyway. You'll need a Mini Cooper to rival this Nissan's performance, and in petrol or diesel form, that car will cost you around £1,500 more and only give you 3 doors. For 5-door Juke rivaling Mini motoring, you'd need a Mini Countryman, and for that, with a comparable engine, you'd be looking at a cool £4,500 more. So we need to look at other rivals. So what? Well, a Toyota Urban Cruiser? No, pricier and not as powerful. What about a Kia Soul then? Well, perhaps. We all thought this South Korean car looked quite funky until this Nissan came along. Now, a Kia would need a lot of extra cost adornment to tempt potential extrovert Juke buyers. And it's not even much cheaper in diesel form, although a petrol Kia Soul might save you about £1,000 over this Nissan. Now, whichever engine you choose for your Juke, 117 PS or 190 PS 1.6 litre petrol or 110 PS 1.5 litre diesel, you should find your car to be well equipped. Automatic transmission is optional on the normally aspirated 1.6 litre petrol and mandatory if you take up the 4-wheel drive option on the top turbo variant. Standard kit across the range includes air conditioning, alloy wheels, a decent quality 4-speaker MP3 compatible CD stereo, a drive computer, a height adjustable driver's seat and remote central locking. Bear in mind that base models don't come with a clever Nissan dynamic control system that's really an integral part of this car's offering. Desirable options include the Nissan Connect infotainment system and a rear parking camera, while even more extrovert types can opt for a roof sticker and striping set. Safety-wise, you get anti-lock brakes, of course, with electronic brake force distribution to make them more effective and brake assist to help in emergency stops. Plus ESP stability control is standard. You also get 6 airbags, while little ones are protected in the back by Isofix child seat fastenings. With this car, Nissan seems to have kept a decent cap on running costs thanks to an efficient set of Euro 5 compatible engines. These deliver decent fuel economy, which can see you achieving as much as 55.4 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle if you go for the 1.5 litre DCI diesel, which comes with an eco-friendly diesel particulate filter. That figure falls to 44.8 miles to the gallon if you go for the 117 PS 1.6 litre petrol model, or 40.9 miles to the gallon if you go for the 1.6 litre petrol DI GT turbo that I'm driving here. Though if you opt for that turbo power plant with four-wheel drive, the figure of course falls again to 37.2 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle. Now you can monitor your success in getting close to these figures on a day-to-day basis via the bar chart history screen on the Nissan Dynamic Control System. As for CO2 emissions, well, things kick off with 134 grams per kilometre for the 1.5 litre diesel. Not quite enough, despite its pure drive eco badging, to qualify you for the free first-year road tax that you get in the UK with a model that delivers under 130 grams per kilometre of CO2. Next up is the 1.6 litre 117 PS petrol Juke variant that delivers you 147 grams per kilometre of CO2, and the 1.6 litre DI GT turbo that I'm driving here, well, that manages 159 grams per kilometre in two-wheel drive form. If you opt for it with four-wheel drive, then the figure falls to 175 grams per kilometre. Now, those are reasonable but not especially impressive figures, but the insurance groupings make quite good reading. They start at 11E, that's a grouping on the 1 to 50 grouping scale, rising to 12E for the kind of 1.6 litre petrol normally aspirated model that most customers will want, and range right on up to 20 for the top of the range 4x4 variant. Servicing, well, that's every 12,500 miles or every year, and residual values, well, they're actually quite high, thanks in no small part to this model's individual character. Cap Monitor reckons that after 3 years and or 60,000 miles, you should get between 52 and 54% of your original purchase price back, which is much better than a lot of ordinary superminis, and a few points higher than even the iconic Mini. Nissan would like you to see this as a cross between a 4x4 and a sports car, a macho alternative to a supermini for youthful urban buyers. Roomy, yet compact, robust, yet dynamic, playful, yet practical. The Juke is certainly all of these things. True, it won't appeal to everyone, but that's because it's not supposed to. If you love it, you'll really love it. But even if the opposite is true, you have to admire Nissan for having the courage to do something different, very different. At a stroke, it makes other supposedly funky small cars, the Kia Soul, the Toyota Urban Cruiser, even the Mini, look really rather dull and compromised. Here at last is SUV-like style for the small car sector without any SUV-like compromises. Precisely the same trick the company's larger Qashqai model pulled off in targeting bigger family-sized models in the market segment above. It's an approach that's worked once more here, and one that will doubtless be much copied, just as the Qashqai was. But this is the original, and if you're either young or young at heart, I can see why you might also think it to be the best.